Prabhupada ki jai. Jai. Shraddha Thakur Chaitanya Nityananda Sri Vedananda Shiva Sri. Hare Krishna, everybody. Hope all of you can hear me and see my screen.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Okay, so last time I believe we did through text 47. Is that right? Does anyone recall? I think so. Let me just double check. Yeah, 46, 47. Okay. So we'll start, continue from verse number 48. So this is second chapter. We are discussing the third theme within these, the theme of arguments that Krishna provided to answer Arjuna's question. So the third theme is specifically asking Arjuna to arise above duties, prescribed duties which are materially motivated, right? And in that regard, we discussed a series of verses. So the last verse that we had discussed in detail, this very important verse, is also very often misunderstood, which talks about the fact that we have the right to perform our prescribed duties, but we are not entitled to fruits. And this might not be easy to understand, but what we discussed in summary was the fact that initially everyone is motivated by some sort of material benefits or remuneration, but the idea is that in due course of time due to law of diminishing returns, when one the actually allurement of that material motivation goes away, right? So in the current context, the allurement is sort of kept by ever increasing salary or promotions. But right, if you look at traditional society, there are no salaries, right? I mean, there might be some, of course, they're maintaining their livelihood. So the what is it that keeps them going? Well, what keeps them going is basically they are impelled by their nature to act, right? And what essentially that means is it's not your passion, but it's because it's not something that you like, or not necessarily something that you excel at doing it. Those are not the criteria, but this is something that one feels a strong connection, wants to keep on doing, right? Regardless of the remuneration. Now, remuneration is automatically taken care of in due course of time. But there is a higher purpose by which they are motivated. It might not be there initially, but eventually, if they are actually situated in their nature, then it would be very easy for them to achieve this particular state where they are driven by that higher cause, right? And so that is basically purification of work. So that's a brief revision of what we discussed last time. Okay, text number 48. We'll continue from there. Yogastha kuru karmani sangam tyaktva dhananjaya siddhya siddhyo samo bhutva samatvam yoga uchyate. Perform your duty equipoised, Arjuna, abandoning all attachment to success or failure. Such equanimity is called yoga. So here Krishna is again coming to the same point, right? Initially, Arjuna's consideration was, well, whether I would be able to enjoy the kingdom. Even if I win, all my kinsmen would be dead, right? So that is again a material consideration. What is it that I'm going to get out of it, right? But here Krishna is advising him that when one does the duty equipoised means that the consideration is not so much about success or failure. What am I going to get out of it, right? And that is the beginning of yoga, right? So the same activity which was earlier materially motivated is now yoga, right? What changed? Well, what changed was just the consciousness. Like Arjuna, as a Kshatriya, had fought many battles in the past, right? And he was about to fight this one. But he was about to fight, or had decided that he didn't want to fight for different reasoning. That was a material consideration. Now, at the end of Bhagavad Gita, when Arjuna decides that, okay, he will actually, not abandon his duties, then what changed, right? What changed was that then he would act in an equipoised fashion without consideration of success or failure. And so that becomes yoga, right? So then it becomes karma yoga. Before that, it's not a karma yoga, right? So yoga means linking to the supreme, right? Yoga means link, right? So earlier it's just karma. So we can link to Krishna by our mind, by our body, right? By our intelligence. So everything can be applied to the service of Krishna. But when that is not there, then it's just simply karma kanda, jnana kanda. So kanda refers to different sections, right? Which are in the Vedas. That's what it means. So the sections in the Vedas which talk about karma or prescribed duties, they are all materially motivated. Jnana kanda is again, detailed description of knowledge about various things. But that knowledge again is not linking. If it's not linking to Krishna, then it's not yoga. It's just jnana kanda. Upasana kanda. Upasana kanda are sections of Vedas which talk about how one can perform different kind of sacrifices, fire sacrifices, to please different demigods, and in order to achieve some kind of whatever they are materially motivated by, right? It could be position, wealth, name, fame, right? So all of that is kanda, right? But same thing can be converted into yoga. How? What needs to change? Well, the consciousness needs to change. And that's what the subject matter of Krishna's instruction is. So here Krishna tells Arjuna that he should act in yoga. And what is this yoga? Yoga means to concentrate the mind upon the Supreme. That is, you link yourself to the Supreme by controlling the ever disturbing senses. And who is Supreme? The Supreme is the Lord. And because he himself is telling Arjuna to fight, Arjuna has nothing to do with the results of the fight. Right? So here, Srila Prabhupada is giving an example that, there is a distinction between one acting out of one's prerogative versus one acting under higher authority. I've given this example, which again I'm quoting Srila Prabhupada's example that he has given in the past, is that when in a military or an army, the sergeant, right, or the commander, he gives instruction to the soldiers, right, to fight. The soldiers, they are not acting on their own accord, right? So when they are acting against higher authority, then they are, that is transcendental. Then they are successful. They might actually die in the process of fighting, but they would be awarded a medal, right? Or if they win, right, then that is victory. So that also, but it's not a personal victory or a personal gain, right? They're doing it for the sake of the country and doing it based on the instructions of a superior authority. But the same soldier comes back to one's hometown and goes about shooting people, right? Randomly, or even for what the soldier might think that this is the right reason. I am doing it in a self-defense or whatever that reason could be. Then even in that scenario, then the court has to make the decision, right? Whether that violence was justified or not, right? Because the individual acted according to one's own prerogative, right? Was not based on a higher authority. So now that needs to be judged, right? So that is a difference. So here, what is happening? He says, so what it means to link to the Supreme. A link to the Supreme means that Arjuna has to listen to Krishna, right? So here Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's the highest authority. He's the knower of the Vedas. And if Arjuna just takes this instruction, right, from Krishna, then if he's acting according to the dictation of Krishna, then his activity would be perfect. Following of Krishna's dictation is real yoga. And this is practiced in the process called Krishna consciousness. By Krishna consciousness only can one give up the sense of proprietorship. Otherwise, if you're not acting under the direction of a higher authority, then what will happen is the consideration, what consideration we would act on? Well, the same consideration as Arjuna had, meaning that we'll look at our individual proprietorship, right? One has to become servant of Krishna or the servant of Krishna. That means if we do not have direct access to Krishna, which we don't, right? I mean, we still have his instructions in the form of Bhagavad Gita, but we take instructions from someone who is self-realized or one who knows dharma, right? That's why in the Vedic society there are Brahmanas. The Brahmanas, they voluntarily accept poverty. Why? So that they can speak the truth and they can provide guidance to the society, how the king should act, how they should administer, how people should behave. So that is the idea, that one actually has to take dictation from a bona fide authority. So again, Krishna consciousness means, it literally means, our consciousness for deciding, or the criteria for deciding what one should do, what one should not do, right, should not be based on other external consideration, but then we base it according to dharma, which is instructions of Krishna, and that's what Krishna consciousness means, right? By Krishna consciousness only can one give up the sense of proprietorship. One has to become servant of the servant of the servant of Krishna. That is the right way to discharge duty in Krishna consciousness, which alone can help one to act in yoga. So Arjuna is a Kshatriya, right? And being situated in the Varnashram Dharma, he has to act according to the duties which are prescribed for Kshatriyas, right? It is said in Vishnu Puran that the Varnashram Dharma, the entire aim of Varnashram Dharma is to satisfy Vishnu. Ultimately, that is the purpose, and we'll learn later in Bhagavad Gita how that is the case, right? So I actually did give some hint. The hint was initially people are materially motivated, right? Because that's how everyone is motivated. But in due course of time, what will happen is then they will gain knowledge that why they are doing, for what reason they are doing, how they should be doing, right? And when they gain that knowledge, then they understand that the whole purpose of the sacrifices, yeah, is to satisfy Krishna. And that there is a verse in Srimad Bhagavatam which mentions that. Let me see if I can remember that. Yeah. I'll let you know if I'm able to recollect it. But essentially, what it says is that the ultimate purpose of everything is to satisfy Krishna. Especially, the Varnashram Dharma is meant for that purpose. And unless one satisfies Krishna, one cannot correctly observe the principles of Varnashram Dharma. So it's both ways. Varnashram is actually meant for satisfying Krishna, right? And then if that is the objective, then we have to see if that objective is met or not. So what is, if that objective is met, which means that we are able to satisfy Krishna, then only one can correctly observe the principles of Varnashram, right? So it's validation. The final outcome validates if we did everything correctly or not, right? So if the end result is that we are able to satisfy Krishna, then we can be sure that the principles of Varnashram were properly followed. So that is the understanding of this verse. Indirectly, Arjuna was advised to act as Krishna told him. Any questions on this particular verse? Okay. Verse number 49. दुरेन हि अवरं कर्म बुद्धियोगात् धनञ्जय बुद्धौ शरणम् अन्विच्छ कृपणा फलहेतव. O Dhananjay, keep all abominable activities far distant by devotional service, and in that consciousness surrender unto the Lord. Those who want to enjoy the fruits of their work are misers. Okay, so there are two parts, right? So here Krishna is introducing another concept of, first of all, one needs to determine what is worth doing. So using the word avaram. So varam means the best, or that which is worthy of doing, right? And avaram is the opposite, something that is not worthy of doing, that is abominable. So first of all, Krishna is saying, well, one should discard, right, all those activities which are not worth doing, right? Then by applying intelligence or the strength of Krishna consciousness, when intelligence is aligned to the higher purpose for the satisfaction of Krishna, one having been situated in such a consciousness, one should fully surrender to the instruction of the Lord. And what is that? The instruction is to perform the prescribed duties according to one's varna. Those who want to enjoy the fruits of their work, they are misers. So it's an interesting word that Krishna uses over here, right? Kripana, which Srila Prabhupada translates as a miser. So who is a miser? If you look at the definition of miser, right? Who is a miser? Who can we have some participation, right? What is the typical understanding of a miser? Anyone?
Who doesn't spend?
Yeah, right. Miser means one who does not spend, or does not know what, where to spend, how to spend, right? So that there is a nice analogy that the wealth is wasted if one actually spends too much, is frivolous, then the wealth is wasted, because that wealth is being spent for things which are not really needed, right? The other side, the other extreme is also waste of wealth. What is the other waste of wealth? The other extreme is when one does not spend any money. So what's happening? Well, the money is only sitting, right? And that is just nominal wealth. Just that's why the people say that when somebody is rich beyond a certain limit, all their wealth is nominal wealth, right? If the stock market goes up, then somebody who is a billionaire or multi-billionaire, their nominal wealth goes up. So tomorrow it's up, then next day it's down, the third day again it might go up, and that nominal wealth actually does not make any difference to them, right? Even if they spend very luxuriously in buying more villas around the world, and they might have islands that they might have purchased or whatever, right? So even after spending all that, they have so much nominal wealth that it really makes no difference. So one who actually holds on to wealth without spending it, that person is actually a miser, right? And so he is actually wasting the wealth. He's not putting it to proper use. So that's why people who are intelligent, they engage in philanthropy, right? So we have Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation over here in Seattle area. And Bill Gates, he did make a lot of money, but he's saying this is way more than anyone can reasonably use, right? So what did he do? He started a charity, right? So misers, they do not know how to utilize the assets of riches, right? They just keep on hoarding it. So in this context, what does it mean? Those who want to enjoy this is a different definition, right? Here Krishna is saying, who is a miser? Miser is one who wants to enjoy the fruits of their work. He's a miser. Well, what it literally means is that one is acting in a way which is not the best use of your energy. Just like if you spend money, if one does not spend money properly, that means one is frivolous, right? Is misusing the money or spending the wealth and not for the proper cause. Then in this context, that person can also be called a miser. It's not the standard English definition, but if you look at the Vedic perspective, there are two sides of the same coin. What might appear to others as two different positions, the dualities, right? According to Shastras, those dualities, they come from the same root. For instance, attachment and renunciation, right? So the attachment and renunciation, and this renunciation I'm saying is renunciation not in a spiritual way. It's not in a devotional way. When people get frustrated by material activities and they want to completely renounce things, right? But that renouncement might not be positive in the sense that it might not be necessarily spiritually uplifting. They just want to give up. Like Arjuna, he wanted to give up fighting, right? Because his consideration was material. So those are two sides of the same coin. There is not much difference. Externally appears that there is difference, right? But if you try to understand that in essence, then there is no difference between the two. So that's why there's another example, right? So I think I told this in the past. One in Shastras, there is this one word that is used, which is niyam agraha. Niyam agraha. So niyam plus graha, niyam plus agraha. Agraha means to not accept the rules, right? Which is generally the liberal position. Left side. We are not so much into being bound by different constraints in the forms of rules, right? So niyama agraha is generally the liberal position, and the other position is niyama agraha. Agraha means insisting on following rules and regulations, even when somebody does not fully understand why these rules and regulations are needed, right? There is proper application for everything. So insisting that rules and regulations have to be followed every single time in all circumstances, without understanding the purpose, that is called niyam agraha. And the conservative or the right wing generally falls in this category. So niyam agraha and niyam agraha, when you join the sandhi, it comes in both cases. The sandhi comes up to the same word, which is niyam agraha, because a plus a is a and a plus a is also a. So if you look from the perspective of Shastras, the both positions are ultimately the same. They are just two different manifestations of the same root cause. So similarly, in that context, one who, because the outcome is still the same, right? One is not properly situated. Srila Prabhupada used to say people work during the weekdays. When they get in, and that is again, it is very challenging and is exhausting. And then we want to renounce work. So we temporarily renounce work over the weekends. And then because we are not properly situated, we cannot be in the position of renunciation for a long time either. That's why you see many sannyasis, what they do is, when they artificially or prematurely take up renunciation, they cannot be properly situated. And so again, they come back to material activities. And that's why many of them, start different charitable organization. But spirituality, the humanitarian based charity, we don't find in the scriptures. Especially the renunciates. I'm talking specifically about those renunciates. Those who are renounced, they are simply interested in uplifting the people morally. They don't engage in charity, which the householders are engaged in, the kshatriyas are engaged in. So that is not their duty. But many times we see that those who, having taken renunciation, when they are not, or the renounce order of life, when they are not properly situated, they start different kind of material activities, right? Could be, there would be some relation, maybe to promote health, and they might start a Ayurvedic pharmacy business, for instance, right? And then it might appear that this is something spiritual, but they are not fully situated in the spiritual realm. So the same thing applies over here. So in this context, what misers mean is that someone who does not know what is proper activity, right? Either they waste, right? They waste their activity, waste their energy and effort in doing things which are actually not uplifting, right? So what I mean by that is, one is not acting in proper consciousness. That is one kind of category of being miser. Not being properly situated is as Krishna is saying, one is one who wants to enjoy the fruits of the work, right? He's a miser. Why? Miser does not know how one should spend money. That is the essence. And that is manifest in two different ways. Either they overspend or they underspend. In both cases, what is the root cause? That they do not know how to spend the money. So the same thing when it comes to using one's energy in doing prescribed duties, right? Or duties or any kind of work. The one kind of miser is one who is over, this you can compare this to as someone who is overspending or not spending properly, right? That means one is acting, but he is satisfied only with some temporary fruits that come from the results, right? Why? Because they don't have a higher knowledge that there is something higher that they can achieve beyond the temporary benefits of some immediate success or some material benefit that one might get, right? The other category of miser is one completely stops working, right? So one who is not spending money at all. So they would whimsically give up their prescribed duties. They would just like Arjuna wanted to reject that, I am not going to fight. Why? But again, what was the criteria that why he didn't want to fight? He wanted to enjoy the fruits of the results, right? So for enjoying the fruits of one's activities, there are two possibilities. One might be inclined to act and one might not be inclined to act. In both considerations, What is the primary criteria? Well, they want to enjoy the fruits. Right? But both perspectives are miserly perspective, because in both scenarios, one is not doing an ideal thing. One is not situated in proper consciousness. Does that make sense? Anyone has any questions on this? Anyone? Okay. So one who has actually come to understand one's constitutional position as an eternal servitor of the Lord gives up all engagements, say working in Krishna consciousness, right? So this is proper understanding. One might not come up to this understanding immediately. It might take some time. But by this process, in due course of time, one would start questioning, and then one would understand, one would gain knowledge. And later we'll learn Jnanagni Dagdha, by the fire of knowledge, all kind of karmic reactions can be destroyed. Right? What has changed? Only things change is consciousness. So such devotional service is the right course of action for living entity. Only misers desire to enjoy the fruit of their work. And by doing so, they are further entangled in material bondage. Right? So in both cases, if they are not properly situated, they're not acting in proper consciousness, they want to enjoy the fruits of the results, then obviously they are implicated in the karmic reaction, regardless of success or failure. Regardless of the success or failure, because they are materially motivated, there is karmic reaction. The other scenario is somebody might think, what if I just stopped acting? If I don't do any work, right, then I won't have to deal with this scenario. That's what Arjuna was thinking. But just by stopping one's action, one cannot be free from karma. Right? Karma happens at every single moment. Karma can happen by our mind, by our consciousness. So the consciousness is important, and not when one is properly situated in higher consciousness, whether one acts or does not act makes no difference, because their consciousness is properly situated. And if the consciousness is not properly situated, then both karma, that means acting and not acting, both leads to bondage. So except for work in Krishna consciousness, all activities are abominable, because they continually bind the worker to the cycle of birth and death. One should therefore never desire to be the cause of work. Right? So again, last time I explained 5 causes for the work, right? Yeah, Kashyap, you had a question.
Can you explain what is karma?
Yeah, so karma actually is, when you read Bhagavad Gita, depending on the context, karma is used in many different ways. So one meaning, and this appears quite often, karma just means prescribed duties. There are duties which are prescribed according to one's varna. Because when we say prescribed duties, we might think, oh, it's not duties which the company assigns me or my employer assigns me. I mean, in the current context, it's not the duties that we think, but these are the duties which are prescribed by the Vedas according to one's nature. Those, that is referred to as karma. That is one meaning of karma. The other meaning of karma is the reactions that come from those kind of activities, right? And the prescribed duties can be performed in a materially motivated way, or they can be performed without material motivation when one is properly situated in proper consciousness, right? So when one is properly situated in proper consciousness, then there is no karmic reaction to that activity, right? So that is called karma phala, right? Karma phala, the reaction or the result of that activity. Then there is something called vikarma. Vikarma is those activities which are prohibited, just like Krishna is saying avaram. That is called vikarma. These are specific activities which in scriptures there is an injunction not to perform, right? And there's a long list, but you can say meat eating is proscribed, right? Gambling, then intoxication, right? Illicit relationships, all those are proscribed activities, right? So that is vikarma, that's acting against the injunctions of the nature. Then there is something called niskama karma, which is what I was saying is when the activities, the prescribed duties are not materially motivated. When one acts on those prescribed duties, not being materially motivated, then you call it niskama karma. So this is again an adjective. Kama means material motivation or some desire. Niskama means without it. And there is akarma. And akarma refers to inaction, literally, but it's not any kind of inaction. Here it specifically means he is someone who is already transcendentally situated, right? And they have actually renounced. So one is a renounced order of life, either a vanprastha or a sannyasi, and they have fully taken to the higher spiritual process, right? So they've gone through the phase where they are actually, maybe initially they were materially motivated in their grihastha life, then over a period of time they really understood what is the purpose of these prescribed duties, and then finally they come to the proper conclusion, that ultimate purpose of all the prescribed duties is satisfaction of the Lord. And when one has perfected oneself, then either vanprasthashram or sannyas ashram, typically they stop the varna based duties, especially the sannyasis. They are not engaged in any varna specific duties, right? They are not engaged as such. Actually, even brahminical, the brahmanas, they are supposed to do different kind of sacrifices, teaching. So sannyasis are not really engaged in that. I mean, they're not teaching students like in a gurukul, but they might still give instruction to the householders. So they have given up all kind of designations. So our karma literally means, it could also mean in if you look at our Vaishnava sampradayas, there are acharyas who are just there are two categories. One is bhajanandis, which is those who are interested in bhajan, and the other are ghostanandis. That means they go out and preach or they present the message. So the bhajan meanings, they're maybe just sitting in their kutir or just doing their own devotional thing. They're not, they don't appear to be nivrut. That's the word they use in India. Nivrutti is called retirement. Of course, in retirement, in common parlance, there are other kind of activities that one engages for leisure. But here nivritti means they are not engaged in any kind of vritti. They are just self-satisfied and they are spiritually situated. So there's a different kind of further categories of karma. So does it answer your question?
Partially. I'm when I say karma, I'm trying to refer. You have a karma of your previous life that you're carrying, or something in that sense. I'm just trying to understand. You did mention, when the knowledge
When
comes
properly situated in knowledge.
properly situated in knowledge, that actually burns up your karma, and you'll be free from all the karma, right? I'm trying to understand what is that karma that we'll be free of, and how do we acquire that? Um, um, just to get some knowledge around that, how I'm trying to understand what exactly it is, and by getting the knowledge, how I'm going to get off from that.
Yeah, that's a good question. So again, we'll be discussing this in much detail, but to answer your question, first of all, karma, I think you understand, right? Where the reaction of the karma is any kind of action, because as long as we think we are the doer and we are materially motivated, there is a reaction to it. And even if that's a good karma or bad karma, in both cases there is a reaction. For the whole purpose of karma again is to correct our consciousness or correct our understanding, our perspective of the world. So we act according to certain perspective, and the reaction is basically to put us into a situation where we are forced to reevaluate our perspective. That situation kind of challenges it. It's nature's way of teaching us. That's what karma means. So we make distinction between good and bad. The nature does not make any distinction between good and bad. We call good karma if something that is favorable to us, and bad karma, karmic reaction, if we are put into difficulty. But in both scenarios, what is nature trying to do according to the laws of nature, which again, it's Krishna's arrangement, is they're trying to correct our thinking or perspective. I'll give you an example. When somebody hurts an animal just to satisfy one's tongue, right? I mean, like meat eating, for instance, then the perspective that somebody might have, right? They have some sort of justification they would have, right? Well, so they might come up with a justification. Well, if you look at, well, humans are after all animals. If you look at the laws of the nature, one animal consumes other animal. I am not killing that animal for sport, just to maintain my body. I need to eat something and I'm doing it, right? So maybe that's what their perspective is, right? So when they justify in that fashion, they are somehow not addressing the part that, well, the animal is suffering, right? Are there any other alternatives that I could perceive, for instance? So by nature's arrangement, they are put into a situation when they are themselves subjected to violence, in the sense, and then they are made to feel what that suffering is. And then, it's not it's not in a very cynical way where, the nature is punishing, just for some sort of pleasure, right? It's not. But it's basically, if you think that this is all right, okay, okay, let me put you in the shoes of someone who is actually experiencing it, and then you tell if you think that is all right or not. That's one example. Similarly, on the favorable side, where somebody might say that, it's very nice to do different kind of charitable activities and help the poor, which is good, right? One should do. And, of course, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna later says that charity should never be given up. So all those are good. The karma, the activities that are prescribed, and one should do it. But if one considers that all in all, the ultimate perfection is that, I engaged in philanthropic activities, then they have this, this is the highest way you can help others. So that is the perspective. Now what it might, so the karmic reaction for that, okay, you did good to others and you yourself experience that good that you did to others. Somebody might get higher birth, great wealth, beauty, knowledge, because of the pious karma from previous activities. But when one is put into that situation, if one is intelligent, in due course of time, one will realize that, okay, this is good and I'm getting some sort of benefit, but then that this is not ultimately satisfying me, right? So ultimately they are thinking I am the doer, right? When they did those charitable activities, right? What was the whole idea? Well, either they are materially motivated that by doing this is what I'm going to enjoy, or even if they are not materially motivated, there might the sense of I am the doer. See, I have so much wealth, I could have done other things, but actually see how much charitable I am, right? So unless one is properly situated in dharma, that there could be their consciousness is not properly situated. So the reaction of that might be, okay, you are going to get good results from that karmic activity, but no matter what kind of body or condition one gets as a reaction, right? Either as a body of a demigod, or even in human form of life, one is situated in the next life as a in a good family and a rich family. But in due course of time, what will the desire for the soul to be fully satisfied, right? To experience blissfulness eternally without interruption, that is not achieved. That's what happens, right? Because again, there is birth, there is old age, there is disease and death. And then one might question, okay, there must be something beyond this. So just like if I did something good, and if I'm not situated in the consciousness that ultimately this is for the satisfaction of Vishnu, whatever needs to happen, right? Okay, this is as a grihastha, I'm doing this, these are my duties, but I'm not doing, this individual is again connected to Krishna, right? And my duty is as a grihastha is to serve that individual, right? and I'm not expecting any desires, any glorification, or any kind of benefit in my next life, then what happens is, once consciousness is properly situated, then one does not is bound by that reaction, right? That means one doesn't have to accept a body. In order to enjoy the results of one's action, again one has to accept another body. So that is also binding, right? Binding either for a good reason or a bad reason. Both leads to bondage. Right. So that is answer to your first part of the question. Does it answer at least the first part of the question?
Yes, definitely.
And can you repeat that second part of the question again?
I think it's a single question. Like I'm trying to understand what is it karma that.
Yeah, jnana. You're asking jnana, right? Yeah. So jnana, how is it that knowledge, destroys one's karma? Well, the knowledge, the way it destroys one's karma is when one has knowledge, one is acting in proper consciousness. Everything is about consciousness. It's not so much about the work, but in the consciousness that one does. Like if we give a mundane example, somebody might kill, and if somebody is experiencing an assault in self-defense, one might kill the offender. Then the judge will see what was the motivation, right? It's the action is there, but more than the action, it's obvious that person was killed by this individual, right? But then what is the criteria based on which the judgment? Well, what was the consciousness? Why? What was the motivation? Why did that person act? Right? Was that violence justified? Right? So that decides the outcome. Same thing. So karma, when one is acting, in proper knowledge, right? When one does not think oneself as the proprietor of the things, right? One is doing the prescribed duties according to the injunction of the Supreme Lord, right? According to the injunction in the scriptures. And it's understandable initially there might be some material motivation, but in due course of time, if they are very sincere, they will inquire and they will understand, they will find answers from scriptures, and then they will continue to do the same activity, but now their consciousness is completely different, right? And so then those activities, they don't lead to karma. They are burned because their consciousness is properly situated. Because what is the whole purpose of karma? As I mentioned initially, the purpose of karmic reaction is that it wants to put us into a situation whereby we are forced to reevaluate if our perspective is right or not. But if our perspective is right, if our outlook towards life is correct, then there's no need for further correction. Like the child, either I might be, if the child is performing nice, and I might actually further materially motivate by giving awards or some kind of prizes or some sort of allurement, right? And the child continues to do that, right? And so okay, so every year, or whenever the child performs well, you want to motivate it, reinforces the habit, right? Or the child is not performing well, then and even after explaining, he does not listen, then there might be some chastisement to bring the perspective. But in both cases, that external intervention is needed. Why? Because in both cases, the child really does not know why he is doing what he is doing, for what reason is doing. The person who is doing initially, he does not know, okay, this is going to help me advance my career, I can have a good job, or there is no value without it. The small child does not have all that understanding, right? So that person who is actually very sincere is also not properly situated in the consciousness, and one who is not following those activities is also not properly situated, right? But what happens in due course of time, and when the child, well, first of all, child needs to start acting. So if that chastisement is what going to take, or if it is allurement, the child needs to perform the duties, needs to do the homework regularly, needs to study the lessons regularly. And in due course of time, as the child becomes mature, once it starts doing without even understanding why he's doing, but eventually the child understands, oh no, now I understand why I'm doing, for what reason I'm doing. And then the child is not motivated, does not need allurement, does not need punishment. It's situated in proper consciousness. Then the parent doesn't need to intervene, doesn't need to provide any allurements, doesn't need to provide any punishments, right? So the need for karma to act, a karmic reaction to intervene, has completely gone, right? There's no reason why as a parent either I have to chastise him or give some other allurements, because the child is now motivated by a higher cause, and so that the karmic reaction then stops. So you can think of that. Does it make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I really like the way that you explained how the nature is actually giving it. I've seen it as like a pendulum, right? You do some action, the reaction will come the other side. It's like you will eventually get balanced and get to a stable state. That's probably the state where we acquired the knowledge. But as far as we go with one half, I mean, not full knowledge, we always try to disturb the balance, and we always go to the other side, and we'll get the reaction for it. So it's like, and it'll keep on going on until we acquire that knowledge that we need to know to come to a state where we know the actual knowledge, whatever it is. Then we'll not actually make actions in a way that it will create a imbalance.
Yeah. You don't, your consciousness is properly situated.
Yeah.
And the karma reaction doesn't need to intervene. The whole purpose of this, the surgeon or the journey that the soul is taking, is to rectify one's perspective. And there are so many different ways where one's perspective might not be properly situated, and then all these situations actually lead us to think, right? There's no force in the sense that, okay, reevaluate. Everyone is, it's otherwise we'll become a robot if we are programmed, right? But all this, whatever successes and failures that we experience, they're all opportunities for us to at every moment reevaluate if our consciousness is properly situated or not.
Yeah, and also we don't need to feel bad or sad because of things happening to us, because we have to be doing that with the knowledge that this probably a way for us to figure out what is that we are missing out, and we have to probably take something from out of it and move on and try to learn from it and gain the knowledge, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, one should therefore never desire to be the cause of the work, right? So we also discussed there are 5 causes or 5 factors of the work. So we are not the sole cause of the work. There are so many factors that affect it. And then whatever we do, we should do it in Krishna consciousness, or for the satisfaction of Krishna. Misers, they do not know how to utilize the assets of riches which they acquire by the good fortune or by hard labor. So by the grace of the Lord, and we might have good health, good body, good position, access to riches, and we are able to perform the prescribed duties. But then if the consciousness is not properly situated, then despite of doing everything, just like one might have 10 zeros, but it's all zeros, there's no value unless you put a 1 before it, right? If you put a 1 before 9 zeros, then it becomes 1 billion. But if you remove that 1, all those 9 zeros, they have no value. It's all 0, right? So all the hard labor that we put in, it's all simply a waste if our consciousness is not properly situated. So despite of doing everything right, that's why in we see a lot of asuras. They are very charitable. They are learned in Vedas, like Ravana. Is well versed in the Vedas. Many might be really charitable. They do charity. But what is their consciousness? Their consciousness, we learn that in later chapters where Krishna is explaining what is the mentality of demons or asuras. They say, I am the controller. Ishvaro aham, aham bhogi. I am the enjoyer. Siddho aham, balam sukhi. I have achieved so many things. I have so much strength. right? I'm happy. I have defeated so many enemies. I'll defeat more enemies tomorrow. I have given so much charity. That's another quality. See, I have done so much dharma. This is all the nice things I am doing, right? So the whole idea is me. I am the doer, right? So the consciousness, despite of even studying the scriptures, our Hiranyakashipu, how much severe austerities he performed. Right? He performed austerities to such an extent that his entire body was eaten by ants. There was nothing left, only skeleton. Muscles and flesh and veins, everything eaten up. And Brahma came to see him. Okay, you want benediction? I see you doing an extreme austerity. There was an ant hill which was built on top of his skeleton, but still the life air was there. And so Brahma came and he surprised. He says, I am the creator of all the species, right? And I myself surprised. I understand the biology in and out. I'm the creator of how the bodies work, how the subtle body, gross bodies work. And I am myself surprised at how you are able to maintain your breath or life air when practically nothing exists in your body. Only the subtle body is there. The biological body is completely destroyed. So such extreme austerity is able to perform. But the same thing if he had performed for higher perfection, like austerity is recommended in the scriptures. But what was his consciousness? His consciousness was, by performing this austerity, I'll gain the boon of becoming immortal, right? And once I become immortal, then I'll continue with my ambitions to enjoy this world unlimitedly, right? So it's not fixed in proper consciousness that the who is the ultimate enjoyer. What is this activity meant for? You might be doing other kind of sacrifices, but who is the ultimate enjoyer of all the sacrifices? That is not known. So those are misers. They have the good fortune, and they apparently are engaging in different kind of activities, and even they might be engaging what might appear as prescribed duties, but then their consciousness is not properly situated. So one should spend all energies working in Krishna consciousness, and that will make one's life successful. Like misers, unfortunate persons do not employ their human energy in the service of the Lord. So this is the other category, right? So which I was saying, they do not. Okay, let me read this again. One should spend all energies working in Krishna consciousness, and that will make one life successful. Okay, so here the analogy, like misers, is the fact that just like misers don't know how to spend money properly, those who are unfortunate, they do not know how to spend their valuable human energy in the service of the Lord. That's what it means. Any questions on this? Okay, move on to the next verse number 50. Buddhi yukto jahatiha ube sukrita duskrite tasmad yogaya yujyasva yoga karma sukaushalam. A man engaged in devotional service rids himself of both good and bad reactions, even in this life. Therefore, strive for yoga, which is the art of all work. So here, buddhi yukta. Buddhi yukta is the intelligence or consciousness is properly situated. That's what it means. So Prabhupada translated as a devotional service, because if the consciousness is properly situated, then one comes to the right conclusion of the Vedas, which is, Krishna Akhila Chesta. The ultimate purpose of all activity is to satisfy Krishna. So by being situated, one actually, what happens? One gets rid of both good and bad reactions. Even in this life, one stops accruing any karma. Therefore, strive for yoga, which is the art of all work. Just like the child, when one is situated in the proper consciousness, does not need any allurements of prizes or the fear of chastisement, and so that the karmic intervention just stops. The purport Srila Prabhupada explains that since time immemorial, each living entity has accumulated various reactions of his good and bad work. As such, he is continuously ignorant of his real constitutional position. One's ignorance can be removed by instruction of Bhagavad Gita, which teaches one to surrender unto Lord Krishna in all respects and become liberated from chain victimization of action, reaction, birth, and death. Right? So because of ignorance, what happens? One is getting reactions of good and bad work. Right? And as long as one continues to remain ignorant, that cycle perpetuates. But by understanding Bhagavad Gita or the instruction of the scriptures, and when acts on it, what happens? Well, one becomes liberated, right? One becomes liberated from the chained victimization of action and reaction. So Arjuna is therefore advised to act in Krishna consciousness, the purifying process of resultant action. Right. So what is it here? Srila Prabhupada is giving the definition, another definition of Krishna consciousness. Well, one definition that we already know, right? Everything that we do, our consciousness is to please Krishna. And what is the outcome? The byproduct of such consciousness is that the reaction or the is annihilated, right? So purifying process of resultant action. That means the resultant action or the resultant karma is not there. That is the purification. Purifying process of resultant action. So when one does not accrue any more karma. Any questions on this particular verse? Okay, verse number 51. Karmajam buddhi yukta hi phalam tyaktva manisinah janma bandha vinirmukta padam gacchanti anamayam. By thus engaging in devotional service to the Lord, great sages or devotees free themselves from the results of work in the material world. In this way, they become free from the cycle of birth and death and attain the state beyond all miseries by going back to Godhead. By thus engaging in devotional service to the Lord, great sages or devotees free themselves from the results of the work in material world. So it's basically summarizing, not summarizing. Now in this particular verse, Krishna is giving examples. First he gave him instructions, right? That how one can be free from karmic reaction. Then he's saying, well, what is the proof? Just like, we go to business school and we learn management science, right? And after that, so the theory is explained, and then there are case studies. So case studies are basically analysis of how that theory was applied in that situation, or in sometimes how it was not applied. And when it is not applied, then we see these are the failures, and how their failures could have been avoided if that theory was applied. And then same thing, then you look at some successful case studies where the theory was applied and you see the outcome. So you give those examples. Here Krishna is saying that there's something, it's not something new, right? We have proof that great sages and devotees, they have freed themselves from the results of work in the material world. In this way, he's giving examples, right, of others who have taken to this path and have seen the results. In this way, they have become free from the cycle of birth and death, and they have attained the state which is beyond all miseries, right? So padam gacchanti anamayam, anamayam, without miseries. So they achieve that position where there is no more miseries. Janma bandha. So it's very important, janma bandha. So one might, what it literally means is whether one has good karma or bad karma. In order to enjoy the results of the good karma, one has to take birth, and that is the bondage. It's the bondage of taking birth. And as soon as there is birth, there is death, right? So whether good results, good activities or bad activities, they both lead to bondage. But karma jam means those reactions which are born of fruitive activities. So karma prescribed duties, but if they are not performed in proper consciousness, or they are performed with a fruitive mentality, then it leads to reactions, right? But when one performs those buddhi yukta, so then it's not fruitive activities anymore, right? They're still the same activities, but what has changed? The consciousness has changed. It's not fruitive anymore. Then what happens? Phalam. Phalam tyakta means one is not motivated by the results. The devotees in the past have achieved that perfection. So in purport, Srila Prabhupada mentions this very famous verse. It's also very, in terms of poetic beauty, this is one. There are so many nice verses in Bhagavatam, but this is one of the classics. And you can see this verse, as I recite, you will find that the word padam is used so many times in different forms, and each padam means feet, but in context of different similes and metaphors, it's a very nice message that is conveyed over here, and I'll just recite this. Samasrita ye pada pallav plavam mahat padam punya yasho murare bhamam mambudir vatsa padam param padam 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 yad vipadam natesham. So he says one who has accepted the boat of the lotus feet of the Lord. So plavam is a boat, but pada pallava plavam. So what is this boat? The lotus feet of the Lord are compared to a boat. Why? What do we use boat for? We use boat to cross a river, right? Or an ocean, like a ship liner. So this material world is so vast, it's compared to an ocean, because we so many repeated birth and death, and there's so many universes and so many planetary systems, and solar just transmigrating. It just seems like there's no way out of this place. But by taking shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, those feet turn into a boat which can help cross this ocean of material nations. So that's why Lord is known as Mukunda. Mukunda means one, the giver of liberator, right? The ocean of the material world is like water contained in calf's footprint. So you say, what will happen? Now this ocean, which earlier appeared so vast, so huge, that no one can cross it. Because one took shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, now crossing this ocean looks very easy. It's not insurmountable anymore. What has this ocean, which was so big, now has turned into just a puddle of water, like water contained in calf's footprint. So some in the fields, the land is a little soft, or especially going to the rice fields, a little marshy kind of land. It's quite humid and it's very moist. So when the calf's footprints come, when the calf actually, it's not a calf, because a calf footprint is even smaller than the footprint of a cow. And in that impression, or it's that small ditch that has been created, which is probably not bigger than the palm, the water which is contained in it, that huge ocean has now kind of reduced in size to water contained in a calf's footprint. Anyone can jump over a calf's footprint, right? So that's the analogy that he used. And so what is it? For those who have taken the shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, what is their ultimate destination? The destination is Param Padam, another use of word Padam. Param Padam is the highest destination. This Padam is also used to refer to a location or a destination. What is it, Param Padam? That Param Padam is a place where there are no material miseries, right? Their goal is not this place where there is danger at each and every step. Padam Padam, every step. Vipadam. Vipadam means unfavorable situation. There's a different twist to that word. So every step there is Vipadam. That means unfavorable situation. That is not the destination of such devotees. So it's a poetically is also very very beautiful verse. And it's a very deep meaning. So Srila Prabhupada is quoting this verse in the purport to Krishna's verse, where he's saying that, well, sages in the past, they have taken to this process and they have crossed over this cycle of birth and death. And so there's another befitting verse which explains that. So owing to ignorance, one does not know that this material world is a miserable place and there is a danger at every step. Because of our ignorance, less intelligent persons try to adjust the situation by fruitive activities, thinking the resultant actions will make them happy. So we always try to make things comfortable. Like just like you go to somebody is put into a prison and you might get I want to get a better prison cell if they have power or influence they might be able to get some conveniences in the prison, but ultimately they are still in the prison, right? They might have a better cell or access to better food, but they are still a prisoner. So our situation is like that. If we are slightly better situated or situated in the heavenly planets or in the bodies of the demigods, you might think, oh, this is a favorable situation, right? All the conveniences, the modern conveniences are to that effect, right? If it's very cold, if you have a heater, let me turn the heat on. If it's too hot, let me turn the air conditioning off, right? So just little adjustment here, little adjustment there, and that should make me happy. But still the people are miserable, right? If I have a miserable job, even if I turn the heater on and make the room temperature convenient, but what about all that stress which is already in my mind, right? And no amount of adjusting the heater can take care of that. So ultimately, even if somebody doesn't have any other problems, they still have the problems of birth, death, old age, and disease. There is no one who can claim that they are free from these four miseries of life. Now, birth is painful. No one takes birth laughing or smiling, right? The process itself, even before one is actually born, the body, when it's being formed in the embryo, it's a very painful process. One is crammed up into a very dark and very small place for a long time, and the body is developing like it's like a live surgery happening. And sometimes the mother eats something spicy and the child actually feels it. And so the entire process itself is painful. Death, no one wants to die, right? Those who do commit suicide are, they are so much frustrated with other things that are going in their life that they think death is a viable alternate solution, right? But then death itself is miserable. Old age, when the body gets old, does not function to the fullest ability, it's the source of all problems. Sarira Vyadhi Mandira. How the body is compared, the scriptures compares the body as the temple of miseries. So it's kind of when you use the word temple, it appears something very nice, but actually it's it's kind of sarcasm over here. But it's a temple. Sarira Vyadhi Mandira is the body is full of all miseries. Could be diseases through pathogens. There are other kind of miseries that are inflicted by other people. Somebody might say harsh words. Somebody is very rude. They say that physical wounds, they go away, but harsh words spoken by someone, people remember all their life. I mean, pure devotees are not affected, by such inflictions, but others, they are, right? So in this way, in this material world, there's a danger which is present at every step. One who understands his real constitutional position as the eternal servitor of the Lord, thus knows the position of the personality of Godhead. Then one is fixed in that constitutional position, and despite of all these inconveniences of one understands the temporary nature and the fact that it cannot be avoided. One engages himself in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Consequently, he becomes qualified to enter Vaikuntha. Kuntha means anxiety. Vaikuntha, where there is no anxiety. One achieves that destination where there is no anxiety, where there is neither material miserable life nor the influence of time and death. So he's not subject to the repeated birth and death. In spiritual world, the time is not there in the sense that time does not move according to a preordained cycle. If Krishna desires, I want the season to be spring, right? Then today is spring. In the evening, it could be autumn. So whatever Krishna desires to enjoy, the time manifests it accordingly. And so there is no time in that sense that it's not going according to a preordained cycle. On a subtle dimension, the other function of time is to bring about three effects. At every moment we are lamenting about the past. We are fearful of the future every moment. Like every moment I think, oh, I should not have done this. I should not have said this. maybe I should have taken purchased this house, or I could have taken pursued this employment instead of the job that I have. So there's lamentation of different kind. So the lamentation is always in the past, right? We lament about things that have happened, and we are fearful about the future because we don't know what the future is going to look like, right? And there is illusion about the present tense, right? That means we have a certain perspective of things, but most likely that perspective is not properly situated, and that leads to illusion. So time actually brings about these three kind of miseries. Lamentation is miserable. Every time we lament, it's not a happy situation to be, right? Who says that I'm sitting lamenting and feeling happy? It's not good to be fearful also, fearful about the future. And to be in illusion is obviously not good, because when we are illusion, then we cannot act properly. That's why we want the reality, right? When we don't want to listen to fake news. Some people prefer to be in that fake identity or fake reality, and we saw recently in the recent events what's the outcome. They end up into not ideal situation, and they might be eventually punished as they were by law enforcement. So being illusioned is also not nice. So time actually kills us at every moment in all the three tenses. So in spiritual world, one is not subjected to those kind of effects, so subtle effects of time, and then there is no death. Is not subjected to that repeated birth and death. So to know one's constitutional position means to know also the sublime position of the Lord. One who wrongly thinks that the living entity's position and the Lord's position are on the same levels is to be understood in darkness, and therefore unable to engage himself in the devotional service of the Lord. Yeah. So this is the other misconception, where sometimes there is a branch of spirituality who think, well, okay, I'm spiritual, Lord is spiritual, but when I achieve liberation, then I'll be same as the Lord. There's no difference. So that Srila Prabhupada is saying that is also not proper understanding. Rather, it's in darkness. And because of that understanding, that kind of spirituality is not spirituality, because there is no attitude of service, because one thinks, well, I am the Lord, and the perfection or getting out of this material world is basically that I will become the Lord, right? I'm not able to enjoy. They realize that I'm not able to enjoy fully in this material world, because the material world is by design imperfect. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Dukhalayam asasvatam. By design, this place is full of miseries, and it is temporary. So from that they know, okay, we have to get out of it. But their idea is, once we get out of it, then I will be able to enjoy unlimitedly. I will be the real Lord. I wanted to lord over the material nature, which I am not able to do it over here. But once I achieve that spiritual perfection, I would be able to enjoy independently, right? So again, that consciousness has not changed. They still want to be the enjoyer. They just want to change the situation. It's slightly little bit more intelligence. Well, you cannot achieve it over here, so I have to go out of this place. But then they don't have this idea of service to the Lord, or the fact that the Supreme Lord is always different and is independent and is the object of our service. So that is still in darkness, right? It's not that it appears very spiritual, but actually it is ignorance. He becomes Lord himself and thus paves the way for repetition of birth and death. So what Srila Prabhupada is trying to say, that because one is not properly situated in consciousness, even when one is able to temporarily achieve that perfection or apparent perfection, which means that the soul, having crossed over the coverings of the material universe, might merge into the Brahman, which is the light or the effulgence coming from Krishna's body. It becomes a soul or a particle which is part of that effulgence, but there is no engagement. It doesn't have a spiritual body. It does not know where this light is coming from. It's just that if you go from a negative range of numbers to 0, then you don't have to deal with the negation. So it's just nullification of the negation, but that does not, bring about positive engagement, right? And so one cannot be situated in that place for a long time. It might appear long time from our perspective, but eventually the soul wants some engagement, and what happens is that the soul falls down again to repetition of birth and death. But one who, understanding that his position is to serve, transfers himself to the service of the Lord, then one becomes eligible to live in those planets, reach the spiritual planets from which that Brahman effulgence is coming, right? And those are the Vaikuntha Lokas. Service for the cause of the Lord is called Karma Yoga or Buddhi Yoga in plain words. Devotional service to the Lord. Any questions on this particular verse? Okay, text number 50. Okay, yeah, go ahead. Yes, Parvin.
So I have a question just overall in. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah. So I have a question overall in terms of just the whole theme that we've talked about, right? We talk about activities in without fruited results and so on, but we live in a world which is full of judgment, right? And your activities, whether they are for fruity results or not, right, or for all the right reasons or wrong reasons, are continuously being judged by in a society that you live in, people around you, right? So I'm kind of curious about, and I am not as well read as you are. So my question here is, how do you get past those external factors that question your activities and your intentions on an ongoing basis, right? So how do you, it's like there are prescribed set of duties, even doing those, you're being judged on those, right? And there are reactions, as a human, you react to those, right? So how do you now kind of get past that?
Yeah, it's a good question. So obviously it's not a very ideal situation to be in. And in order to make it easy for everyone, well, Krishna's plan again was the Varnashram system, where again we are not engaged. And in Varnashram also there is material allurement. So in one way you can say that it's not very different, because the only thing, the difference between the Vedic society and the current society is that the desire for enjoyment or the material motivation is on steroids, right? I mean, it's to an extreme degree, and that is one. The other one is that it's not based on principle of dharma. In the Vedic system, the foundation is dharmic, right? It's based on the principles of morality. Well, okay, you want to pursue different kind of enjoyment, but this is the restrictions. It's not in an atheistic way. And because that moral platform eventually provides people to, when they're frustrated, they already on that moral platform, and they have access to the scriptures, which are also giving moral injunction. Then they can get the higher purpose. So that is lacking, right? So now that is what it is, right? So we are not in an ideal situation. Now the fact that we are not in the ideal situation, how do we deal with this? That's the question. So again, the question is, and again, there are different levels of this. One is, if one should first of all find out what one's nature is, and should take up a profession that is similar to a nature. And what I mean by that is, it won't be exactly like Vedic society, but as I was explaining, whatever domain one is in, could be computer science, or could be retail business. But in any domain, there are 4 kind of natures and related roles. Well, one is teaching. Well, somebody knows computer science, but they might be more suited or driven to teach. Somebody else might be good in administration. Well, so many IT companies, and there's so many things and innovations happening, and all these industries are not regulated. So the regulator obviously needs to understand all the technologies in and out, and then somebody with that background, but they are more suited for that kind of work. And the other one is more money minded. So when they hear about technology, they would think, okay, how do I use this to make money? And then the other category, labor classes, they are just enamored by the technology. Okay, you make money, whatever. I'm just happy that I'm able to work on this technology, right? So they are different motivation. Just like and this nature is there, and we have to first of all dig deeper into ourselves to find out what our real nature is. It might not be easy because especially at an advanced age, like I'm almost 40 now, and I'm already charted out a certain course, so I cannot overturn things. So maybe there's a limited bandwidth for it, but at least those who are younger in the age, and those are able to change, they should be able to do it. I'll give you an example. Shastra's quote, that's when, say, somebody goes to a forest, this is an example from Shastra, but gives us a perspective that everyone put into the same situation, a different mentality. Based on their mentality, they look at things differently. A Brahmana goes to a forest, we say, oh, this is such a nice secluded place, right? And it's so quiet and peaceful, let me just do meditation, right? So that's immediately the thought comes. A Kshatriya comes and he says, oh, this is a forest, there are so many animals, there's an opportunity for me to master my hunting skills or the art of using weapons, right? And then a Vaishya mentality person comes, he looks at the forest, he sees, oh, there are so many fruits and there are barks and there is timber and lumber, and there's wax, and there's so many things I could procure from the forest and go to the village or this town and sell it, right? And then a Sudra comes to the same village, and the same forest, and he says, no one's watching me, I can engage in sense gratification on here, my master is not watching me, and I could do nonsense, maybe I can bring my girlfriend and enjoy or have an illicit relationship with someone. I'm just giving an example, but depending in a situation, one based on one samskaras, one is forced to act. Now in our case, because our mixed upbringing, sometimes there might be a mixture of samskaras, and we cannot really figure out what our nature is. But if we really dive deeper, we can find out one's nature. So the first thing is, if you're engaged according to the nature, by acting at that platform, despite of all the defects associated with that work, by acting according to that nature, our nature itself is purificatory. Just like a tiger, as in this example, cannot be expected to be a vegetarian. There's no karma for it, right? So in any activity, there are some faults. Sarva arambi doshena dhumin agnivan anavrita. Just like fire is covered by smoke, all activities have fault. But because I'm engaging in that activity while it is aligned to my nature, I'm not implicated in that karma. That is the first thing. Now, there might still be some fault, but now that work is worth offering it to Krishna. And so when I offer the results of that work, and eventually I'm not even materially motivated. I'll try to answer the question specifically how we can relate to that, how we can actually act on it. But I'm just providing the framework first. When one is not, the law of diminishing return comes in, and though the initial gratification that we seek is gone, now we are just doing based on our nature, and so we really don't worry so much about our success or failure. We keep on doing it, and that work is so pure now that can be offered. The results can be offered to Krishna. It's worth offering it to Krishna as yajna. Just like bhoga that needs to be offered to Krishna should be purified. So now the question is, how do we deal with it? And one reason why we are not able to overcome people's judgment is that we are not engaged to our nature. I gave that example of that security guard at Best Buy. He was laid off, but he said, well, this was the right thing to do, I'll continue to do it. He didn't mind so much what the outcome was. And so that's why sometimes, now we'll give an example of what kind of people we see in our offices. And you might have come across people who are so, I want to call them a labor class. They're enamored by technology and they're happy to work on technology, and they're getting remuneration. And sometimes they're just, satisfied. And as long as they're able to work on new technologies, or, they don't get so much bothered by, the office politics, or sometimes, there's success of the project, or sometimes there is failure, and of course they learn from it and they keep going, right? They're not so much bothered by the ups and downs. In that sense, they are properly situated, and generally they don't go through extreme upheavals. Why? Because they are fixed by their nature. They will keep doing their activity, right? Even, and the life will go on. Now what happens is, there is this famous management article, I'll see there's a law actually. They say that the varnashram, the lack of varnashram problem manifests itself in a very different way, which they are not able to link it to varnashram. But what they're saying is that the whole system becomes inefficient when everyone is promoted to a level where they are incompetent. That means, suppose I'm a really good engineer, a good programmer, they'll make me a manager. Oh, this person is a good programmer, and they made me a manager. Now I'm really might not be a people manager, right? But just because I was a good programmer, they made me a manager. So now I'm promoted to my level of incompetency. I mean, a level of and then I'm stuck over there. So I cannot perform optimally. And that's why people who really know what their nature is, and they say, okay, maybe I'll become principal engineer or senior engineer, but they never take up management roles. They're properly situated, so they are lucky. They know what their nature is, and they are fixed to it. But those who are not, they end up in situations or positions which are really not conducive, and they tend to be more affected by the judgments of the people. And so that's unfortunate. So I think the big part of the problem again is to be really identify where I am properly situated, and then naturally you won't be affected so much by the upheavals. Just like a businessman, there's this example like the Gujaratis in Uganda. They were thrown out by Idi Amin. And then what did they do? They overnight they lost all their wealth, or they accumulated all their life, but they went to London, UK, and they were successful businessmen in few years. Again, a businessman, because they're business minded, even if they succeed or fail, they will never give up business. They will try this business, that business, they will keep on doing it. Right? He said, oh no, I'm not gonna take, I'm gonna take a job tomorrow because I've never succeeded in business. They won't do it. It's just their nature. And so there are many examples, where people are situated. They really know what they have. First of all, if they are good, pure samskaras, in the sense that if they don't have too many mixed samskaras, then it really messes up things. That's one way to solve problem, right? And you can see these things in our day-to-day life. There are people who are properly situated. Somebody's trading at stock market. Made so much losses, but he will go next day. It's not that he will stop doing it. There's a nature. Ups and downs come and they go, and it doesn't matter what people say. So I don't know if I have a very easy solution. Now that you can apply other things philosophically, saying that this is temporary, and ups and downs come, and so many other ways that I can elaborate at some point in time, or maybe right now, where we can try to convince mind and keep going. But I think the fundamental problem is to be really situated where according to one's nature, and then a lot of these problems are automatically taken care of, because the maintenance of the body will come, right? And so just like the case of the engineer or programmer, their manager or the VP might be saying, we need to make so much business, we need to make so much money, and they're hearing this constantly, right? But they are not so much affected by the numbers, how much money we made yesterday, what the funnel looks at on Microsoft.com, how much sales we did, right? Not so much. They might not be even checking, or they might be checking just because it's because they were asked to look at it. And sometimes the VP, hey, we guys did not do a good job, or this project was late or whatever. So they hear and they keep on moving, right? So they're not so much affected by it, right? Now, for a Vaishya mentality, it's fine to have. If somebody is really Vaishya, this whole idea is, well, they they are in that business of making money. Of course, the way Vaishya Krishna defines is where primarily it's agriculture and cow protection, and then it is supplemented by some trading or business. So these are all super Vaishyas, if you want to call it. It's not exactly Vaishya, but they have that mentality where even if they fail, they will pick up another business or they will try better. And for them, if the Vaishya mentality person situated in that kind of role, then it's just an occupational fault, I guess, if you want to call it a fault, but that's their nature. So even if they perform imperfectly, like did I quote that verse? I think quoted many times, that even if one does their work imperfectly, it's better to do work according to one's nature than doing somebody else's work perfectly. And so even if they might not be fully perfect or they're not meeting their targets, they're engaged according to their nature, and that's fine. I think I spoke in a very long way, but I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does. I think there is a follow-up question, but that's, I'm sure I'm noodling over, is how do you find one's nature, right? Like, how do you find your nature, right? How do you continue to strive, right? Like what you think is your nature, because there is no sort of criteria that you judge yourself by. It's like, how do you then continue to evolve, right? Because what you think your nature is may not be your nature as you work through it. So
right. I mean, there are a few things or yardsticks that one can use. Is, well, one thing I say that it need not necessarily be something that you can excel in, you are expert in. You may be, you may not be. It may not be something that you necessarily like. You might like, you might not like. But this is something that you are forced to do. You think this I have to do, whether I succeed or not, whether I like it or not, whether I'm good at it or not. And I'll continue to do it, even if I don't get, I mean, you will get some remuneration. I don't think we are in any situation where you won't. But you are impelled, and that's why I'll share this article with you after the class. It's right, maybe I already did. I don't know if I did, but it's called, I think it's from Harvard Business Review. It says the best career advice you can give someone is not follow your passion. Generally, that's what we hear: follow your passion.
yeah, you shared that already.
Yeah. So follow your blisters.
Yes.
And I think in that article it presents in a modern context, I think, but it's not exactly varnashram, but it's kind of it's touching some of those principles. And I don't know if you're able to read that article or not, but
yep.
the whole idea is the saying, take up a profession that you will keep on doing even if you have blisters, right?
Yep.
And so when one is engaged in a role like that, I think you should be, my understanding is, should come as fairly as possible considering our situation, that you would be engaged according to that nature, and then would be properly situated.
Thank you for answering in the detailed question.
You're welcome. Are there any further questions? If not, I think we'll take a break. We're already beyond 6:30, and look forward to continue the discussion next Saturday. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.